I'm Effie Parks. Welcome to Once Upon a Gene, the podcast. This is a place I created for us to connect and share the stories of our not-so-typical lives. Raising kids who are born with rare genetic syndromes and other types of disabilities can feel pretty isolating. What I know for sure is that when we can hear the triumphs and challenges from others who get it, we can find a lot more laughter, a lot more hope, and feel a lot less alone. I believe there are some magical healing powers that can happen for all of us through sharing our stories, and I'll take all the help I can get.
Once Upon a Gene is proud to be part of Bloodstream Media. Living in a family affected by rare and chronic illness can be isolating, and sometimes the best medicine is connecting to the voices of people who share your experience. This is why Bloodstream Media produces podcasts, blogs, and other forms of content for patients, families, and clinicians impacted by rare and chronic diseases. Visit bloodstreammedia.com to learn more.
Hey friends, welcome back to the show. This is Once Upon a Gene, and I'm your host, Effie Parks. Hey, if you love this show, or if this show has ever made you feel less alone, helped you find community, helped you learn something about what to do next, please head to Apple Podcasts and leave this show a rating and review, or share it on your social media so someone else can find this show. Word of mouth is the absolute best recommendation that anyone can get, and I really appreciate all of your support. You know what I love about Once Upon a Gene is I like to kind of call it like a cafeteria. You can take some and you can leave some, but there's definitely something for everyone here along their rare disease journey. And another thing is I do like to help provide some of the answers that you need without making you have to go through all of the efforts of making email connections first, trying to figure out if something is helpful. Instead, you can just go over to Once Upon a Gene and get a sense for yourself directly from the source. So today I have two amazing guests from Charles River Labs with us today. And if you haven't heard of Charles River Labs, they're a powerhouse in the rare disease world for research and drug development, especially when it comes to rare disease. And their work helps turn groundbreaking research into real life-changing treatments. So my guests and I chat about Charles River Labs supports rare disease research and how patient advocacy organizations can team up with them to make a real impact. Whether you're a part of a patient advocacy group, a caregiver, or just someone who cares about advancing rare disease research, this episode is full of insights. Please welcome my guests, Roxana Redis and David Fisher. Hello, Roxana and David. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Effie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. We have so many patient advocacy org leaders that listen to this podcast, and also some very highly motivated families and some who are thinking about dipping their toe into it for their disease groups. So hopefully there's a lot that they can learn from this, and we'll give them a bunch of information and keep it as digestible as possible. So can you both tell us a little bit about your roles at Charles River Labs and maybe a little bit about your journey to these positions and what inspired you to work in the field of rare diseases and drug development?
Yeah, why don't I start? So, I've been at Charles River for 20 years. And throughout that entire period, I've been working on rare diseases, not exclusively on rare diseases, but always a common theme was that it would be at least one rare disease program I would be working on. Charles River is a drug discovery and development organization. So we run these programs on behalf of other organizations, and very often those rare disease programs are on behalf of a not-for-profit, a foundation. And 20 years ago, it would be organizations like the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and Cure Huntington's Disease Initiative. So some of the more common rare diseases, and what we've seen in the last 5-6 years is actually a lot of ultra-rare organizations, very small groups of families come together because they, of course, share a common disease and a very rare disease very often. So it's this passion for drug discovery, and now with the possibilities that we have with the greater toolbox to our disposal in drug discovery, like the use of gene therapy, oligonucleotides, cell therapy. It's a very rewarding journey over those years to move from very common rare diseases to very rare diseases.
And how about you, Roxana?
Well, I haven't been with Charles River as long as David. I've only joined about 4.5 years. Prior to that, I worked for a company that also developed therapies for rare diseases. So it was the first time that I had contact with rare disease. And that was because I'm specialized in antisense oligonucleotides, and that's one of the most common personalized therapies nowadays for rare and ultra-rare diseases. And coming from the oncology field, I thought it was quite different in a way, especially because I got to hear about patients that were very young, so children, and that's quite emotional at the beginning because you don't expect children to be sick. And then when I joined Charles River 4.5 years ago, I started having contact with these families that were developing therapies for their children. And similar to David, I find it's the most rewarding part of my job to be able to help them find a treatment for their loved ones.
I love that. For those who need maybe a little bit of a refresher, or for our families who aren't familiar with you at all, company overview wise, can you give us sort of an idea of what Charles River Labs does, particularly in relation to our rare diseases?
So we are a contract research organization. So we don't develop our own assets, our own drugs. This is all on behalf of our clients, whether they're small or large. And this is across different drug modalities, from small molecules to oligos, up to gene and cell therapies. Obviously, the largest number of our clients are biotechs and big pharma. We support the entire industry all the way up to IND enabling safety studies. So we don't run any clinical studies on behalf of our clients. Everything is preclinical, but we support all of our clients to get these drugs in front of the FDA or other regulators so that they can initiate clinical studies. And we are about 20,000 plus people across Charles River. We are a global organization.
That's funny. I was talking to Roxana before recording, and I had looked up, Charles River a while ago and saw that there used to be a location here in Seattle, Washington, but it's gone now. You left us.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so can you tell us how Charles River Labs, your CRO, differentiates itself from competitors?
So we try to have a very broad offering. So as I already mentioned, we're not locked to one particular type of drug, whether it's a small molecule or a gene therapy. We try to consider what is the best option for the particular indication, the route of administration, the age of the patient, and the scientific likelihood of being able to find such a drug. And what also plays a role is cost. It is more expensive to develop a gene therapy compared to an oligonucleotide. Those are just some basic economics. Timelines. It can also take much longer to develop a novel small molecule, so that is a route that we typically advise against for smaller organizations, especially those that are trying to find a therapy relatively quickly because of progressive nature of disease or the developmental stage at which the patient is at. So we try to find the best potential route for these organizations or families. And of course, we have a very deep experience in the discovery and development of drugs. We've seen all kinds of weird and wonderful. So, yeah, these organizations can benefit from the scientific prowess that we have within the organization.
And just to add to what David was saying, I fully agree with him. I think our strength also lies in the fact that we try to advise and think about the disease and the gene and the family in the whole context. And we're not committed to one single modality, so we can try any modality. And also sometimes it happens that we have to tell them that a certain approach is not going to work. And the experience that we've had in this field is something that probably puts us apart from the other CROs.
So what do you think that patient advocacy organizations should be considering when they approach you? Like, what ducks do they need to line up if they want to do contract work?
At least through the years, we've seen families and foundations come to us with different amount of information. And it used to be that they had everything figured out and they knew exactly the direction that they wanted to take. Nowadays, we have families that really don't know much, and that's fine. So we advise them on what should be the first steps. As long as they have the genetic testing done, so we know what is the disease-causing mutation, then this is our starting point, and then we know about the phenotype. From there, we can guide them what they need to be doing, and we also provide them resources.
So, I mean, we know that rare disease organizations are not wealthy. They're not rich. They're families typically raising money from bake sales and lemonade stands. And, so if there's a patient advocacy org with, say, like $200,000 in the bank for tiers, like what could you provide, or what do you recommend, or what best serves a group at that stage so they can best use their dollars?
Yeah, it's of course, we also try to support these organizations if they're trying to raise funds, to support them with any kind of material they need to go out. So for instance, that could be a plan, how to develop a drug, tell them what kind of cost they would be looking at, because that kind of information also helps these families focus the attention and explain to the people they're contacting, they're raising money from, what it is that they want to do, how much they actually need to raise. $200,000, actually, that could be a drug repurposing program, in which you look for marketed drugs, small molecule marketed drugs that could potentially, through some kind of mechanism, whether it's an off-target mechanism or the pathway they're interact with, have a potential positive therapeutic benefit for those patients. So even with a relatively modest sum, you can still achieve quite a lot.
Have you seen the role of patient advocacy groups evolving over the last couple of years in research and drug development with your work with them? That's exciting, or do you still see a lot of roadblocks there? Like, what have you seen sort of transpire in the last couple of years?
So what I've clearly seen is the power of the network. So families reaching out to other families, and that could be a family with a completely different mutation, so unrelated from a molecular or clinical viewpoint, but having the same issues, a very rare disease. How do you handle this? How do you try to identify key opinion leaders, the best hospital that has expertise in this area, or indeed how to develop a potential novel therapy for the indication. So what we really see is that these families find each other, they refer each other to different stakeholders that can help them on their way. I think what is also of a benefit is that certainly getting the whole genome sequencing is more straightforward in some areas. It's not universal even across the US, but we've seen that families get this genetic diagnosis much earlier. Sometimes the interpretation of that genetic diagnosis is still difficult, and they sometimes need additional help there. So the primary physician that has prescribed the diagnosis may actually not be able to interpret this. So that is still a bottleneck sometimes.
Yeah, I've been seeing that a lot with families who are getting genetic tests recently. For some reason, there will be so many things that have pinged on their reports, but they still don't get a diagnosis because it's not even necessarily a VUS. It's just like there, and it's not even understood enough yet. And it's frustrating, but it's also exciting because they are coming so quickly. And I think that they will be understood sooner than later, but
absolutely. And there are more and more resources now just because of the wealth of genetic information that's out there, but also the predictive models that organizations like DeepMind have put out into the public domain, just for researchers to understand if a VUS is actually pathogenic or truly just a variant that may be less important for the diagnosis of the disease.
Yeah. Can you walk us through the process of how a new treatment for a rare disease goes from concept to clinical trial at Charles River? Can you kind of give us that visual?
So perhaps a good example, and perhaps Roxana can highlight this example, is a family that we really recently started to work. So we're not at the stage that we have a molecule in hand, but it shows the thought process that we go through to understand which drug modality should we actually pursue, and what should go into that type of drug. Roxana, do you want to pick this up?
Sure. So exactly as I was saying, Effie, sometimes we just get a family that they know their child has a particular mutation in a gene. And in this case, the patient has a very large deletion. And in that region where the deletion occurs, there are 3 different genes. So they came to us with looking for an ASO treatment. And we said, first, we need to understand exactly the biology behind it and the genetics. So we start the project by investigating the relationship between those genes to really narrow down what is the disease-causing mutation and the gene that is driving the phenotype, so we don't embark on a journey that is taking us in the wrong direction. And once we've figured that out, the idea is that we have one single team that is going to pursue in parallel 3 approaches. One of them is the drug repurposing. The aim of that is that usually drug repurposing takes about 6 months. And at the end of these 6 months, we hope to be successful in finding a drug that could at least stop the progression of the disease and can alleviate some of the symptoms. While in parallel, we're pursuing the other 2 approaches. One of them is an antisense oligonucleotide, and the other one is gene therapy. So all 3 of these approaches are run in parallel. And then we've implemented different decision points. So we're not aiming to continue with all of them, of course, because of the cost, but really looking at different time points. What are the benefits and the disadvantages of either of those, and hoping to drop one of them as soon as possible. And normally, and I've seen that there are other foundations and families that are pursuing these modalities, but not as one single project, rather in parallel with different institutions. And we feel that if you do this in parallel at the same time, it's on one hand saving a lot of time, and it's also saving a lot of cost because we make use of the same resources. So once we know which is the therapy that we're going to continue, then this is passed on to our colleagues in safety, which are anyway involved really from the beginning of the program. So every single program that we start at Charles River, or even start talking about at Charles River, it always involves a team where there's someone from discovery, there's someone from safety assessments, and there's someone that will support with regulatory filing, because we want to make sure that everything is in place and there's going to be a smooth transition through all the steps. There's no lag time, knowing that is very, very important for not losing more time than was already lost.
I love keeping that communication open. Curious if it is the same for the patient advocacy org. Do you stay in super close collaborative sort of contact with them and explain this along the way with them, or are there like more quarterly updates?
No, it's sometimes it's every week. So,
I would figure they would be banging on your email at least. Yeah, okay.
No, it's from our side. So we update them by email weekly. We have every 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we have calls with them to explain where we are in the process, where we show them data, we explain what the data means, what are the next steps. There's always They have monthly meetings with the entire team. So even though we are in discovery at the moment and really just starting to do the screening or the molecular testings, already with our colleagues from the in vivo and from safety are involved. And once a month, we all meet together and we explain where we are, so they know that, let's say, we'll be finishing in September our work, and then immediately after they will start theirs. So everything is aligned and they're always involved. I mean, they want to know, right? It's very close to their heart.
Yeah, I love that. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face in developing treatments for rare diseases? And maybe what creative solutions have you been noodling around or figured out or trying to change?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that what I mentioned earlier is that there is this expanding toolbox of AAV gene therapy, oligonucleotides, even CRISPR. But we also have to realize that we're still limited by our knowledge on how to target particular organs. So, for instance, oligonucleotides, we actually have a very good handle on how to get these to the brain, to the liver. But beyond those two organs, we just have to face it, we would struggle to develop a drug, even though molecularly we can design a drug that targets the mutation. If it needs to go to muscle, to just give an example, or skin, we would struggle because as a whole, the industry, drug discovery industry, hasn't really figured out a well-trodden path to deliver a drug of that type to those organs. So I think those are the biggest hurdles. I think we will also see CRISPR, so gene editing type drugs. The first ones have now been approved, but we also have to realize that the ones that are approved are ex vivo gene editing. So you take blood cells, you edit them, you put them back. And again, to deliver those drugs to particular organs, if you can't just edit the blood cells of the patient, we would struggle. So we have high hopes that industry will solve those problems as well collectively. So we're keeping an eye out, of course, for any drugs that are in late stage clinical trials that are approved. Can we learn from those to target those organs and those diseases that at the moment we can't really serve because delivery is a problem. So I think that is still one of the biggest hurdles, that even though molecularly we have the tools, the scissors to manipulate mutations, but we just can't get it to the right organ in some cases.
So my fellow CTNNB1 mom friend and the CTNNB1 Foundation in Slovenia contracted with you, which was a very good decision. You prepared an amazing protocol for us and showed efficacy on our leading construct, which is going to go to clinical trial. So we're really excited about that. And I was just wondering if you can share any other success stories that are top of mind where Charles River Labs' involvement made a significant impact on the development of a treatment for a rare disease.
Absolutely. So I wanted to, I just mentioned the first couple of true personalized antisense oligonucleotide drugs that reach patients. And this was a truly collaborative effort. So the first one was Milasen. This was an effort between Boston Children's Hospital and Charles River. Boston Children's Hospital did all the design, the screening, and Charles River ran the safety study. But most importantly, I think as well, our colleague Lauren Black, she designed the safety program, the preclinical safety program for that drug, which was accepted by the FDA. And actually, it set the tone for all the following ultra-rare antisense oligonucleotide programs that followed in the years after, to do a very concise single-species tox program for those aficionados. So yeah, Milasen, of course, it reached the clinic. One patient, obviously, Mila, and she was treated for 3 years with that drug. So I think that's the one drug that we always look at as an example of how to do a single patient drug discovery and development program as quickly as possible as well. I don't think we've reached those very aggressive timelines again, because we've always had other problems that we needed to solve in subsequent programs. But that was clearly a marker for us that we always look back to as an inspiration of what is possible if everything aligns, but also as a learning point that actually you can change a paradigm in drug development that is accepted by the FDA as well.
Yeah, Milasen is definitely the bright shining star that completely changed the landscape for drug development in our rare disease families, and just even motivation in general for us. So very cool to have been a part of that. So what advice would you give to patient advocacy organizations looking to engage with research institutions like you?
To definitely reach out and don't be shy to ask any questions. So we're always open to have a conversation and advise, and as David said, prepare a plan on how we would see the development of a certain drug. So I would say just contact us or contact any other company or lab that works in this field.
And we are also very happy to refer families to other organizations that actually may have a program, active program, or are willing to take on these programs. For instance, we work very closely with NLORem, who are developing single patient antisense oligonucleotides for different families. So any family that comes to us, if we think this could be an ASO druggable indication, then we always tell them reach out to NLORem, get submitted to that organization, because of course if they accept the program, they'll run it at their cost.
Very cool. That's important. That makes me think too. So if a patient advocacy org is contracted with you, is that collaboration across the board in sharing data? Would you offer what you're learning in real time to the families to offer to someone else to do something in parallel as well?
That's only if the first family allows us to do that. We clearly would advocate in favor of that. And for instance, we are working together with the N01 collaborative, which are doing just that. And this, of course, was founded by Julia Vitarello, Mila's mom, together with others, to form as a repository of all the learnings that the different organizations have made over the years working on these programs, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can benefit from understanding what worked, what didn't work.
Yeah, I'm excited to get Julia on the show to talk about that when she's ready, because that's very cool. So are you working on any exciting projects or initiatives that you can share about with us?
So we're working currently on 3 projects for 3 families. One of them was the one that I already told you about, which is the most exciting one for us, since it's the first time that we are pursuing 3 different approaches in parallel with one single team. And the other 2 are also quite exciting. One in particular because we will have to rely on organoid data to show that the drug is really working. So we won't be able to show that in animals, but we have to do that in organoids. And the third one is one of those where we've learned through experience on previous projects how to run it faster and what to look out for. So we're implementing all the learnings in that one as well.
So what has been the most rewarding aspect of your work? Like, what puts the pep in your step when you go home from work from a big win?
For me, because I'm really at the beginning in the discovery, it's seeing that it works. So we have the first signs that we have a molecule. And I had actually today, for one of those projects, I had some very exciting data that I looked at together with the team. So saying that there is hope. There is, of course, the problem of delivery, as David mentioned, and we do stress that out at the beginning of the conversation with the foundation or the family, that it might sometimes be difficult to deliver it depending on the target organ. But when you see that first glimpse of hope that we might get somewhere, then to me that's really exciting.
Woohoo! How about you, David?
I think there's certainly, the feedback we've received over the years from parents, how important it has been to, at the very least, have hope to identify a therapy, but also sometimes to see, the benefit to the patients, even though we have to be clear, none of the drugs that we've worked on collectively within Charles River for these ultra-rare indications, you can really label as a cure. They will not cure the indication, at least we haven't yet found one that does, but they alleviate symptoms and improve quality of life of the child, which is so important for us to understand that. And also from a practical perspective, of course, we all live by Zoom call and Teams call every day, but to actually have a call with the parents and sometimes the child that we're trying to develop a drug for, that's incredible. I never thought I would do that, of course, when I started in this industry.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that so much. I'll definitely have all the links to Charles River Labs in the show notes. So if you're a family or a patient advocacy org looking to contact them, they'll be in there. Well, thank you so much for being my guests, and thank you for all the work you're doing in rare diseases. And I look forward to hearing about more future progress.
You're welcome. This was great. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you as well.
I hope you've been enjoying this podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this show with your people, and please make sure to rate and review it on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also head over to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to connect with me and stay updated on the show. If you're interested in sharing your story, or if you have anything you would like to contribute, please submit it to my website at effieparks.com. Thank you so much for listening to the show and for supporting me along the way. I appreciate y'all so much. I don't know what kind of day you're having, but if you need a little pick-me-up, Ford's got you.